Hey guys, tonight we're heading way up into the ancient Andes where the air is so thin you get lightheaded just standing still, and where clay, yes, cold wet clay, was treated like royalty. You're crouched in a windswept courtyard, your breath fogging the dawn. Around you, the kitchens are already awake, not with clanging pans or sizzling oil, but with a hush. Low smoke curls up from squat little ovens made of stone and ash. Chickens hop around like they own the place, and everyone moves like they're tiptoeing around something holy. Why? Because today is a cold clay day, and no one wants to offend it. The pots, you see, aren't just for cooking, they're part of a ritual, an entire belief system that says if the clay isn't stored properly, winter will punish you for it. They believed improperly slept. Clay could sour the crops, crack under moonlight. Or, worst of all, attract the cold spirits that made babies sick. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment, letting me know your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start the morning hunched over a fire pit, watching your host, an elder named Teta Ulma, place hand-sized stones into the ash. No words, just rhythm. She doesn't need to tell you this is the start of the cold clay cycle. It's obvious in how carefully she tests the heat, how she cradles each jar like a newborn bird. These aren't your average flower pots. They're porous vessels made from river clay and ground bone, mixed under specific conditions that villagers say must include silence, dusk, and the witnessing of a dog. Yes, a dog. Not barking, just watching. Historians still argue whether this part was symbolic or if the villagers genuinely believed the dog's presence strengthened the pot's endurance. Either way, they never skipped it. Once the hearthstones are ready, you help Tata place a bowl still damp, still unfinished on top of the slab near the fire. It sizzles slightly, not too close. Never too close. The idea isn't to bake it, just to wake it, she whispers, as if the clay might take offense. You nod like you understand, because honestly, you don't want to be the one who curses the corn harvest by scooting it too far left. The air thickens with wood smoke and llama grease. The heat is dry, but twitchy gusts of cold rush through the gaps in the adobe walls, reminding you that in this mountain climate, fire doesn't win easily. The smoke, by the way, isn't just for warmth. Some villagers swore the scent itself bound the clay to memory, meaning the pot would remember its coldness better after touching morning smoke. Sound ridiculous? Maybe. But let's be honest, modern people literally freeze their faces with needles and call it skincare. So we're not exactly in a position to judge. Still kneeling, Tata begins humming. You feel your shoulders lower a bit. This is the part everyone seems to enjoy the settling. The hush. It's less about finishing the pot and more about setting its temperament. Just like how some people say you can taste anger in a loaf of bread. The Andean women believed you could feel fear in a poorly cured pot. That's why the old women were always in charge of first fires. Not because they were frail or slow, but because they had patience. And patience, in cold clay ritual, is power. A younger woman named Emila joins the circle, carrying what looks like a handful of dirt wrapped in a leaf. It's not dirt, it's river bone powder, a rare ingredient from the valley floor. Not everyone can afford it. Some villages trade wool or even teeth for it. They add it to the clay only after the bowl's been kissed by fire. The moment the powder touches the damp rim, you catch its steam, faint and coppery. The women nod to each other, pleased. That steam, it's called samikai, the clay's exhale. It means the vessel is alive. So you've got smoke, song, fire, bone, and an audience of birds. One bird in particular, a large black and white one with a nasty habit of pecking clay lids, is perched on the roof, watching. Taita throws it a pebble. He's waiting to see if we forget the salt, she mutters, half joking. And yes, salt is the final step. Each pot gets a tiny pinch on the bottom, just before being turned upside down and set to rest on a mossy slab at the back of the kitchen. That slab, she tells you, is older than the village itself. Some say it was left behind by the Tapa Machula, the ancient grandfathers, who lived before even the Incas. Of course, historians can't confirm that, but when you put your hand on the stone, it feels colder than the air and somehow listening. The jars stay there for 2 days, undisturbed, not even glanced at. If a child touches one, they're made to wash their hands in glacial meltwater and apologize to the fire. By sundown, the courtyard is quiet again. The fire is just glowing stones now. The last pot turned. Everyone has returned to their corners to mend clothes, prepare supper, or gossip about whether clay spirits actually get jealous when you reuse lids. Spoiler, they absolutely do. You stare at the final jar, now resting upside down on the altar slab. It looks peaceful, heavy, trusting. You wonder what it's like to be designed for only one job, to be cold and to stay that way even when the sun tries to change you. The next morning arrives with less fanfare, just the soft crunch of cold dirt under your sandals and the distant hiss of water boiling over a clay kettle. You're back in the courtyard, only now the women aren't watching the fire. They're sitting in a circle, passing around a gourd of chicha, not the sweet tourist kind, but the real, sour, earthy beer made from chewed maize, spat, fermented, and stirred with a carved wooden spoon that hasn't been washed in 30 years. You're invited to sip, and you do, if only to blend in. It tastes like a sock full of secrets. They don't just drink the chicha, they hum to it. Teta Ulma and the other older women begin a low, repetitive chant as they pour the thick brew into shallow clay cups, not for themselves, but for the jars now resting on the slab. The clay listens better when it's offered song. Ulma says, and beer, always beer. You sit, legs folded, watching as each pot is touched lightly, respectfully, by a woman's fingertips dipped in chicha. They don't wipe it off. They let it dry there, as if seasoning the surface. It's a gesture so deliberate, so strangely gentle, that you find yourself mimicking it, dipping your fingers into the cool beer and brushing one unfinished rim. The clay feels soft and cold, unreasonably cold. Some clay is born cold, whispers a girl beside you. You can't teach it. You look at her, startled, but she's already gone, trailing after a rooster like the moment never happened. Here's the part historians love to argue about. Whether or not this ritual was about temperature at all. Sure, the Andes are freezing, especially at night. But there's evidence, petroglyphs, and oral stories that suggest the cold was spiritual, not just physical. The chicha songs were said to seal the vessel's personality, imprinting it with patience, quiet, and memory. One fringe theory even suggests that the spit-fermented beer was a microbiome bridge. That is, the women passed their gut flora into the jars, literally embedding their living essence into the vessels. Honestly, that sounds like something a university student would say to justify failing microbiology. But when you watch Ulma press her forehead to the rim of a pot and whisper something you can't hear, it's hard not to believe something is being transferred. A breeze picks up. One of the younger women lays flat woolen cloths over the tops of the resting pots, like tucking in children for a nap. The cloths are dyed pale blue and dark green. Colors, they say, confuse the sky spirits. You're told that if a pot absorbs too much sun or catches the attention of a high-flying condor, it might turn brittle, might forget how to hold what it's meant to store. The Andean kitchens are full of these odd protective measures. Songs, shadows, colors, murmurs, because nothing is just a container. Everything is watching, absorbing, recording. Ulma notices your interest in the cloths and hands you one to smell. It's faintly sweet, like dried herbs, but also earthy. She explains that the wool was boiled with mountain mint and rabbit brush plants that keep memories soft. If that sounds poetic, it's supposed to. The line between poetry and survival here is thin. Now that the pots have been sung to and blanketed, it's time for them to rest again another 24 hours on the slab. No more, no less. During this time, no loud arguments are allowed near the storage wall. Even laughter is softened. One villager was once asked to move houses because her laugh made pots crack. You think they're joking? They are not. You walk through the rest of the kitchen compound and notice the other jars, older ones, resting upside down like turtles. Some are scratched. Others are bandaged with what looks like thin bark and thread. Each one has a story. Some were made the year a daughter married. Others the season of a locust plague. One pot, near the back, has a child's handprint pressed into its base. It's a funeral jar. You realize unused, but not unimportant. You pause before it, unsure whether to move. Olma joins you and says softly, "That one's clay was never meant to warm." You don't ask more. And then, as if summoned, the chicha returns, this time poured into tiny spoons and dabbed onto the cracks of the oldest jars. Why? Because memory leaks, she says, and you must feed what's hollow. That's the thing about this whole ritual. It doesn't follow modern logic. It's not about sealing food for winter in the way we pack Ziplocs. It's about feeding the future with quiet gestures. The jars aren't tools. They're continuities. And like all things built to last, they're tended more like people than objects. A kid runs by and yells. One of the women throws a lump of dried llama dung at him and curses under her breath. You shout near a sleeping pot. She mutters, "Might as well step on your own shadow." It's not all seriousness. Though, someone sneezes, and a younger pot wobbles slightly on the slab. The women laugh. One says the pot is scared of cold noses. Another suggests wrapping it in baby clothes just in case. It's their way of saying, this might be sacred, but it's still life. You're not walking through a museum, you're tangled up in a living, breathing ritual disguised as housework. Before the sun sets, the women burn a handful of dried marigold petals in a corner of the courtyard, letting the scent drift low and thick over the pots. This, they say, is for the forgotten voices, spirits that may have touched the clay during shaping, but were never formally dismissed. You nod, even if your brain is still catching up. The cloths remain over the jars. The chicha bowl is rinsed in ash, and one by one, the women head inside to prepare supper, leaving the courtyard to the cold, the stone slab. And you crouch again, close to the sleeping pots, listening to the wind slide through the dry air. There is no hum, no crackle, just the deep, unreasonable stillness of clay dreaming beneath blue-green wool. You wake to the sound of scraping. Not sharp, not urgent, just the steady hush of something being dragged across stone. The sun's barely up. Mist hangs low in the kitchen courtyard, and your breath puffs in little white ghosts. Taita Ulma is already at work, crouched low beside a rectangular stone slab. Only, this one's different. It's set flush with the ground and glistens with frost. You step closer and notice delicate white lines, thin as veins, running across the dark stone surface. Not cracks, not scratches. They are intentional. Ulma calls them Lakta Raiku, or the city veins. She tells you they were carved long ago by her grandmother's grandmother, tracing the imagined bloodlines of a village built beneath the ground. Each jar must be placed over the correct vein depending on its age, purpose, and emotional chill. You smile. Emotional chill. She taps your forehead. Clay remembers what hands forget. That's the core idea behind this slab. It's not just a place to rest jars. It's a map, a cooling matrix, a kind of analog fridge with a spiritual twist. 1 part geothermic science, 2 parts old lady intuition. The stone itself is volcanic and holds temperature differently across its surface. Some patches feel like snow, others feel like breath. Ulma's hands hover over it like she's reading Braille. Here, she says finally, pointing to a faint swirl near the corner. This one holds for grief pots. You hesitate. Grief pots, she nods. The jars that don't open, the ones filled with ash or stories or things that should never be cooked. You help her move a small clay jar, feather light and sealed with wax, onto that exact spot. It doesn't wobble, doesn't hum, but it seems steadier, as if the stone said yes. Now, this is where things get a little odd. Historians agree that Andean cultures had sophisticated stoneworking knowledge. They aligned architecture with solstices, built resonant chambers in mountains, even crafted water channels that sang. But this idea of emotional refrigeration via memory-guided veins, that's a stretch. Even fringe archaeologists squint at it. Still, you can't deny the way Ulma moves, like someone following rules deeper than language. As you help with the rest of the jars, she explains more. The coldest parts of the slab are saved for what she calls moon pots, clay vessels shaped during a full moon. which are said to be more fragile but better at holding medicine. They cry when you heat them, she says, half smiling. So we let them sleep in shadow. You notice that some jars are wrapped in dark blue string, others in red. Color coding? Maybe. But Olma corrects you. The string's for balance. Blue calms the clay. Red distracts the spirits. Again, you nod like this is perfectly normal. Once all the jars are arranged, you begin the next phase. Tracing the veins, each woman takes a thin reed dipped in black ash and gently follows the carved lines of the slab almost like inking a manuscript. They hum as they go, and the ink stains the stone for just a few minutes before vanishing in the sun. But while it's visible, the courtyard transforms. It looks like a blueprint drawn by someone with too many dreams and too few rulers. You're handed a reed. Your line isn't perfect. It wobbles, stutters, but Olma nods. The stone doesn't need straight lines. It remembers intentions. While you work, one of the younger women begins preparing the opera, a ritual food made only during these cold clay cycles. It's a paste of chilled potatoes, salt, and burnt quinoa, smeared on flat leaves and left beside the jars as a kind of edible offering. No one eats it except the wind. Still, they make it fresh every time. Because, as Olma says, you can't store cold without feeding warmth. That's the contradiction baked into everything here. Cold is not absence, it's presence, just one that moves slowly, quietly, deep under the skin of things. The sun climbs, and with it comes warmth. The mist burns off, the jars begin to glisten. Not sweat exactly, just a film, like condensation after a dream. Olma crouches and whispers to one of the pots, then tilts it ever so slightly to catch a shadow falling from the kitchen's eave. Too much light. She mutters, it's remembering too much. You find yourself squinting to see what she sees. But to you, it's just a pot, a really cold one. Still, something stirs beneath your ribs. A low awareness that this place, this slab, this daily choreography, it's not superstition. It's survival disguised as art. Like when we keep old sweaters in vacuum bags or label freezer meals with Sharpie. Only here, the labeling is done with spider marks and whispered lullabies. You glance back at the slab. The inked veins have almost faded now, just faint gray smudges in the stone. But the jars are still there, silent, still, resting in their places like sleeping relatives in a strange ceramic bed. Olma dusts her hands and straightens her spine. They're ready, she says. Tomorrow we wrap them. Tomorrow, we seal. You help her cover the jars with small flat lids, each one matched by weight and surface temperature, chosen from a crate of dozens. She hands you one and tells you to close your eyes. Pick with your palm, not your eyes. You reach, feeling the chill, the grain, the echo. When your fingers settle on a lid that feels just right, you lift it and place it on a jar. It fits perfectly. Olma doesn't smile. She just nods once. Good. That one listens to you. It's a small moment, maybe even silly, but somehow it feels like a graduation. As the sun begins to slip toward the far ridge and the stone slab cools again, you stay beside the jars a moment longer. You're beginning to understand what they're storing isn't just food or even cold, but time itself. Slow time, ritual time. Time that teaches you to hush, to touch softly, to place things just so, and let them be. By now, you're getting used to the rhythm cold mornings, soft voices, pots that must never be disturbed too soon. Today is wrapping day, but not the hasty kind with tape and cardboard boxes. No, this is slow wrapping, ceremonial, almost maternal. The courtyard smells different this morning, not like wood smoke or chicha. It smells like wet wool, snow melt, and something faintly minty. Olma and two others are rinsing bundles of cloth in icy water drawn from a hidden stream that runs under the village. The cloths are llama wool rough, dense, and surprisingly heavy when wet. You're told these aren't just blankets. They're kirpa, or cooling cloths, and every household has their own stash. Some are decades old. Some were dyed in rare mountain moss to reflect specific phases of the moon. You dip your hand into the wooden basin, the water bites. The cloth stings colder still. You're supposed to wring each one 3 times over volcanic stone, then lay it flat beneath the morning sun for exactly the duration of 2 hummingbird wing beats or roughly 10 deep breaths, depending on your lung capacity. Yes, seriously, you watch Ulma twist the cloth, murmuring something as she goes. Then she lays it over a jar, aligning the seam with a small crack in the lid. It's not about covering, she explains. It's about guiding. She doesn't mean airflow. She means spirit flow. The belief is that cold can leak not out, but in through emotional seams. If a jar held medicine or ancestral water, its memories could get polluted if the cloth wasn't aligned with its origin crack. This sounds ridiculous until you try it yourself. You wrap one of the younger jars. It's small, unmarked. You follow Ulma's pattern. 3 twists, 1 prayer, lay flat, press corners. The wool hugs the pot just right. The air around it feels heavier, not colder, still, like it's been silenced. That's the difference here. In the modern world, we silence things with foam, tape, warning labels. But here, they use cloth, story, ritual. There's a quiet debate among scholars about this stage. Some believe the Kierpa ritual developed as a kind of cryogenic insulation, particularly for preserving rare herbs or fermented roots in the harsh climate. Others think it's just theater, colorful tradition wrapped around a basic storage method. But Ulma laughs at both ideas. They always think we're hiding practicality under superstition, she says. But it's the other way around. Once every jar is swaddled, the courtyard changes. It's no longer a workspace, it becomes a nursery. The pots don't just look like sleeping infants now, they feel like them. No one steps too hard. No one raises their voice. Even the roosters seem to soften their crows. One of the younger girls runs by carrying a bundle of dry leaves. Ulma scolds her not for running, but for crossing the cooling path. You don't see it at first, but eventually you notice each jar is aligned in a diagonal arc from shadow to sun, based on its age and contents. The coldest jars lie in half shade. The newer ones are given full morning light. They say this is how you train the clay to accept change without shattering. It's a philosophy you wish applied to people. Around midday, a strange little object appears. It's a bowl filled with what looks like old cornmeal and mountain herbs, topped with a polished river stone. This is the pankara, or offering eye. It's placed in the center of the courtyard to watch the jars while the women take a break. Ulma insists it's not decorative. The cold behaves differently when it thinks it's being watched, she says, not even blinking. Again, you smile, but something inside you believes her. Deep down, you remember how you act different under streetlights, or how your voice changes when you're on camera. Why wouldn't clay do the same? You return from your break to find Ulma adjusting the smallest jar. It's been leaking. Not water, just heat. Too much dreaming, she mutters. Sometimes they try to remember fire. She rubs a paste of ash and rosemary along the rim and covers it again. That'll settle its memory. This isn't metaphor for her. These aren't expressions. This is maintenance. The way someone tends a violin or a garden. With care, with story. She lets you hold the oldest cooling cloth, a heavy gray one embroidered with faded red thread. It smells like smoke, eucalyptus, and something hard to name. You run your fingers over the stitching. It tells a story in spirals and dots. A river crossed, a baby buried, a jar that cracked during a thunderstorm. Some jars ask to be buried. Ulma tells you, but only after the cold says yes. That phrase sticks in your chest. You've spent your whole life thinking of cold as a problem, something to beat back with radiators and sweaters and complaints. But here, cold is an authority, a companion, a guest you must prepare for. You spend the rest of the day helping wrap the final jars. One is nearly as tall as your torso and etched with patterns that shimmer slightly when wet. Taita says it once held glacial water from the sacred lake above the valley. Now, it holds silence. Its cloth is white with streaks of pink, a rare dye made from crushed cactus flower. Wrapping it feels like dressing someone for a wedding or a funeral. There's tenderness in every movement, reverence, even in the fold of a corner. As the sun begins to dip, the courtyard glows with color: blue, red, green, white, each woolen cover catching the light in a different way. You step back and realize it doesn't look like storage at all. It looks like a memory installation, like something you'd see in a museum, but breathing. The last thing you do is sprinkle cold ash around each pot. A circle, not to trap the cold, but to show it the way in. Ash remembers what fire forgets. Oma whispers. The wind picks up. The pots do not move, but the temperature shifts. The courtyard, somehow, feels colder. Not uncomfortable, just serious. You step away. Your hands smell like mint and earth and wool. The pots rest, wrapped and watched, dreaming of cold things. You're woken by a noise you can't quite name. Somewhere between a sigh and a whistle, low and breathy, like a kettle that forgot it was boiling. The courtyard is still asleep. The pots lie untouched beneath their woolen wraps, but the air around them feels changed thicker, like something important has already happened while no one was looking. Today is moon-checking day. You hadn't realized the moon played such a central role in storing cold clay, but apparently, it's everything. Olma greets you with her usual nod, eyes already turned skyward. She doesn't need to see the moon directly. She watches the way shadows stretch, the way dew clings to stone, the tilt of birds on the roof. The moon's been whispering all night, she says. Let's see if the pots listened. You walk with her toward the edge of the courtyard, where the oldest jar sits half in shadow. She doesn't remove the cloth right away. First, she traces a finger in a spiral around the base counterclockwise. 3 full turns. Then she hums something you've heard before, but can't place. Only then does she lift the cloth. Steam rises. Just a breath. The jar is cold. Not just cool cold, like stone pulled from the bottom of a glacial river. Olma beams. She held the moon's breath, she says softly. She's ready. This is where it gets weird again in the best way. You're handed a spoon, not metal, not wood. Clay, thin and delicate, with markings that look like scratches but are, in fact, a lunar calendar. Each tick represents a moon phase. The villagers use it not to measure time, but to decide which moon blessed which clay. You're told to press the spoon gently to the side of the pot and wait. You do. Nothing happens. But then, the spoon vibrates, just a little, like a heartbeat in your palm. You jerk your hand away, startled. The others laugh, not unkindly. That one's too full. Someone says, she's still dreaming. Turns out, the jars react differently depending on which moon they were stored under. Full moon jars are stronger, but they remember pain. Waning moon jars are gentler, but forget things quickly. No moon jars. They hold secrets, Olma whispers. They hold the dark. You're asked to help check the others. Each cloth is removed carefully. Each jar examined for moisture, temperature, tension. One is cracked, a tiny hairline split down its side. No one panics. Olma simply breathes on it, marks it with a thumbprint of ash, and rewraps it. She remembered too much, she says. It'll pass. Historians still argue whether these rituals were purely spiritual or if the moon checking had an actual impact on clay storage. Some point to the shift in humidity during lunar cycles. Others scoff and call it coincidence wrapped in poetry. But the villagers don't care what historians think. They've seen what happens when a jar is stored under the wrong moon. Grain spoils. Broth turns sour. Children get fevers. They trust the sky more than science. You move to a small jar with a faint spiral etched near its lid. Taita Olma hands you a reed with a dot of melted resin on the tip. Mark her dream, she says. You hesitate. Where she cooled the deepest. You blink. You don't know what that means, but you breathe. You listen, you let your hand hover, and eventually, without thinking, you touch the reed to a small spot just beneath the rim. The resin leaves a perfect black dot. Olma nods. Good. She'll remember that. That's the point of these marks. Not decoration, not ownership, memory. Like writing a note to the pot itself, telling it where it was strongest, where it found silence. As the checking continues, a boy runs by carrying what looks like a bone flute. Only it's not for music. It's a silua whistle used to test for echo inside clay. When blown near a jar, it hums if the interior is balanced, and whistles sharp if the cold has pulled unevenly. You try it. The sound is eerie, a hum like wind over glass. One jar doesn't respond. Olma frowns and marks it with a slash of blue chalk. No more grain for that one. She's too warm inside. You begin to notice how each jar has a personality. Some are stubborn, some respond quickly, others need to be coaxed. The villagers don't force anything. They adjust, reroute, talk softly to the clay like it's a shy guest. When you ask Olma how she knows what each jar wants, she shrugs, the same way you know when someone doesn't want to be hugged. She says, you feel it before they speak. That might be the most human thing you've heard all day. By afternoon, all jars have been checked. Cloths are replaced, except for 3 that are selected to be moved into deeper cold moon vaults. They're called small, dark pits lined with salt rock, used only in winter. Olma says it's because those jars are listening too hard and need silence. You help carry one, a small, cracked pot with a lid that sounds like porcelain when tapped. The pit is about a meter deep and smells of salt and old herbs. You place the jar inside and cover it with dried mint and corn husk. The pit is sealed with a smooth stone and marked with a chalk ring. Let her sleep. Olma says, you step back, blinking at the sunlight. It suddenly feels loud. It's strange. None of this is about storage in the way you expected. It's not about preventing spoilage. It's about teaching the vessel how to forget heat, how to slow down, how to remember stillness, and maybe how to survive something you're not supposed to. You spend the evening sitting beside the jars, watching the shadows shift. The courtyard has become something else entirely. Not a kitchen, not a storage room. A chapel, maybe, one dedicated to the kind of patience that modern life forgot. The kind where silence isn't absence, it's instruction. And cold. Cold is no longer your enemy. It's just another guest, learning where it belongs. The next morning, you're told to bring your boots. Not the soft sandals you've been padding around in like some gentle apprentice of silence, but real, ankle-high, thick-soled boots. Because today, you're hiking to the morning caves. You try not to overreact. But morning cave doesn't exactly sound like a walk in the park, and Olma confirms it with a nod and one of those ominous smiles that Andean elders specialize in, the kind that says, you won't die, but you'll wish you were wearing better socks. The hike begins just before sunrise. A small group joins you, each carrying a single clay vessel, not cooking jars, but something else narrow-necked, sealed, some covered in wax, others swaddled in white wool. You ask why these jars are different. They're cuchullas, Olma says, mourning pots. They're not for food, not for medicine, not for warmth. They hold echoes, stories, names, sometimes teeth, sometimes breath. You don't press for more details. The path winds upward along the ridge, through mist that tastes like stone and juniper. You pass a grove of low, scraggly trees tied with blue threads. Olma pauses there, touches one of the threads, and hums a short melody. The others do too. You follow, feeling ridiculous. But then the air shifts cooler, denser, like the trees noticed. When you reach the cave, it's not much, just a hollow in the rock, dark and uneven, with streaks of white mineral veins catching the early light. But the energy changes instantly. The others stop talking. They kneel. Even the birds seem quieter. The jars are placed on a slab near the back, not arranged, offered. No cloth this time. No salt. Just stillness. Olma steps forward and begins a chant, not loud, not showy, just a rhythm made of breath and memory. One by one, each jar is tapped gently with a stick of charcoal. 3 taps on the rim, 1 on the base. You're told this is how you call the shadow out. There's a moment where you feel something brush past your ear. Just air. You tell yourself, cold air. But still, you ask what the jars do in the cave. They remember, Olma says, and they forget. Some jars were brought here after a child died, others after a betrayal or a crop failure, or a love that never returned. The belief is that the jars absorb a piece of that grief, cool it, contain it, and hold it until the family no longer needs it. Then, one day, sometimes years later, they're cracked on purpose, the grief released, the jar buried. Historians still debate whether this was symbolic or practical. Some say the practice was for mental health and ancient therapy. Others insist it was rooted in animism, the belief that clay could trap energy. But the people here don't care about theories. They just know it helps. Olma pulls a small, cracked pot from her bag. It's sealed with red wax and wrapped in faded thread. This one is mine, she says quietly. My first daughter, stillborn. You look away, not out of disrespect, but because the grief in her voice doesn't belong to your eyes. She places the jar beside the others, taps it once, then steps back. For a long moment, no one moves. Then someone begins humming, low, broken, a sound that seems to come from between their ribs. The others join in, not harmony, not unison, just overlapping sound like water pooling in a cracked basin. You realize you're crying and don't remember when it started. This is grief as storage. Mourning not as something to purge, but something to cool, slow, give shape to, not erase, preserve until the day you're ready to pour it out again. Once the jars are settled, a bundle of dry reeds is burned just outside the cave. The smoke curls in Andean, dances among the pots, and exits without lingering. That's the sign the cave has accepted the offering. If the smoke stays, the jar must be taken back. This time, the smoke moves clean. The cave sighs. The group relaxes. On the way back down, no one speaks for a while. Then Olma begins telling you about a jar that once exploded inside the cave unprovoked, untouched, shattered during a lightning storm that no one saw. Some griefs, she says, don't want to be kept. Back in the courtyard, the contrast is stark. The pots here are wrapped, colorful, warm by comparison. The morning cave feels like a different world. And maybe that's the point. The villagers keep joy and sorrow in separate vessels, separate spaces. Each emotion gets its own temperature. You notice one jar from earlier is missing. Olma notices you noticing. She was ready, she says. You don't ask what that means. Not now. Later that evening, while helping fold the kirpa cloths, you ask how many mourning jars each family typically has. Olma considers. Some have none, she says. Some have dozens. Some have one they keep their whole life. Never crack. You pause. And what happens if someone dies with a full jar? She smiles faintly. Then the next person must carry it. You're not sure if she means emotionally or literally. Maybe both. The night comes fast in the Andes. The stars arrive without warning, sharp and indifferent. But tonight, they feel less lonely. Because now you know, beneath them, hidden in caves and courtyards, and ash-lined storage pits, are hundreds, maybe thousands of clay jars, holding what people were too tired to say out loud. Not forgotten, just cooled. By now, you've stopped trying to understand everything. You just follow hands, eyes, breath. You move like the others do, slowly, carefully, as though every step might offend the cold itself. This morning, the courtyard is being prepped for warding. Not for warmth or storage or silence, but for defense. Not against weather, not even against wild animals, but against what Olma calls hungry steam. You raise an eyebrow at that. She just shrugs. Some cold wants to be stolen. The day begins with the garlic. Dozens of wild garlic bulbs, small and purple, are laid out in the sun. The skins are flaking. The stems knotted. One woman, Yache, is already braiding them into thick ropes. Not decorative braids, but tight, complex knots so firm they hum when plucked, like dull harp strings. You're told that these ropes are called fuyu wachana, cloud barriers, and that they're meant to confuse the cold spirits who drift in during foggy nights. The ropes are hung above the jars, not to touch them, but to watch them. Yes, apparently garlic watches, especially when it's braided with lime peel. You help grind lime rind on a flat stone, mixing the juice with crushed river salt. The resulting paste is smeared on the bottom of each garlic braid, then left to dry under a wool net laced with copper thread. Why copper? To scare the false warmth. Olma says, tapping her earring, they hate metal that remembers fire. You don't know what she means, but the phrase false warmth keeps echoing in your head. While the braids cure, you're sent to draw a ring of salt around each jar, not a full circle, but a broken one. Leave it open, Olma says, so the cold can come and go. You trace each arc with your finger first, whispering as you go. Open salt is honest, she explains. Closed salt is punishment. There's no science to back this up. Of course, scholars assume the salt was for desiccation, keeping pests away. But the villagers tell a different story of jars that shattered when encircled too tightly, of lids that refused to seal unless the salt ring was broken at sunrise. Everything must breathe, Olma says, even what pretends not to. While you work, the courtyard shifts again, not physically, energetically. The chatter dims. Even the birds seem to perch more cautiously. One of the younger women begins laying dried corn husks in small piles around the storage slab. Each pile holds a single black feather. You finally ask, what are those for? She smiles. Camouflage. For the cold, you wait for the joke, but it never comes. Turns out, the husks are arranged in patterns to mimic the local condors' nests, specifically to fool wandering spirits into thinking this area is already claimed. Spirits won't steal what's already guarded, Olma says. Even thieves respect territory. It's during this process that you learn about the steam thieves' spirits described as thin, hot breath that slips through cracks and tries to wake the jars too early. They don't break the pots. They tempt them, make them dream of fire. Yachai says, and a dreaming jar is no use to anyone. To combat this, the women prepare pillay ash, a mixture of dried herbs, chili powder, and bone soot. It's sprinkled lightly over the lids of older jars, never the younger ones. Too strong for them, Olma mutters. Let them shiver a little longer. One jar in particular gets special attention. It's marked with an X carved so deep the clay has turned pale. You learn this one cracked once before but didn't shatter. Instead, it grew colder, she learned. Olma says, now she listens better than any of us. You don't dare ask what it held. By late afternoon, the garlic braids are ready. Their scent is sharp, almost eye-watering. Each one is tied above a pot using red wool thread, never black, never white. Red is for misdirection, so the spirit chases the knot. Olma explains, not the jar. You're allowed to tie one. Your hands fumble with the knot, but eventually it holds. A woman claps softly. That one smells like protection, she says. The jars don't move, don't hum, but you swear the air feels steadier. The final step is perhaps the oddest. Olma brings out a jar of crushed quartz and lichen powder. She mixes it with glacial meltwater and paints a symbol on the courtyard wall. A spiral inside a square. You ask what it means. It's the door, she replies. To what? She just smiles. That evening, as the sun leans heavy against the mountains, the warding is complete. Garlic ropes sway gently. The broken salt rings shimmer. The air is rich with mint, lime, smoke, and something else, watchfulness. You sit beside the slab, watching the pots like they're old friends asleep after a long journey. You think about everything they've been through: fire, cloth, shadow, memory, and wonder if they've ever known what it's like to be warm. Olma sits beside you. She doesn't speak at first. Then she says, cold is a gift. You turn to her. She adds, it teaches the body where it ends and the world where it begins. You nod, not because you understand, but because something in your ribs agrees. Later, under stars that blink like tired eyes, you walk past the pots one last time, each one a little wrapped universe, humming with secrets, not sealed, just held. For now, this morning begins with an unusual assignment: drawing spiders. You're handed a pot shard, a stick of charcoal, and a piece of palm bark polished smooth with llama grease. Olma tells you to sketch a Kuichi Chaska, a spider star. You pause. You mean an actual spider? She chuckles. Not the animal, the memory of it. That clears things up exactly 0%. But you try anyway. You draw something with legs. Too many legs. Someone nearby peeks and stifles a laugh. Olma just shrugs. That one will confuse even the ancestors. You soon learn that these spider drawings aren't art, they're keys. In Andean clay ritual, spider symbols are etched into jar lids, walls, even storage pits, not as decoration, but as mnemonic devices. Each pattern encodes a dew path. Think of it as a secret map showing where condensation forms during certain phases of the moon. Follow the legs. Find the chill. You head to the courtyard, now speckled with dried spider symbols traced in ash. Some spiral outward like whirlpools, others crisscross like cracked glass. The jars sit beneath them as if obeying traffic signs. Olma explains, when the morning dew returns, it will follow the spider's legs, and we will know which jars are still dreaming. You test one yourself. You trace a simple pattern above a wrapped jar, placing pebbles at the knees. It looks a bit like a broken snowflake, but no one corrects you, because here, intent matters more than symmetry. Even messy spiders catch things. Someone whispers. Historians acknowledge that Andean storage pits often contain radial etchings resembling insects or stars, but no one agrees on what they mean. Some believe they were calendars. Others think they tracked rainfall. A few fringe theorists say they were maps for sound designed to vibrate differently when wind passed over them. But here, they're memory tools, clay mnemonic anchors, quiet cues for a cold mind. The next task is trickier. You're given a large jar, one you've helped wrap before, and asked to trace its dew. You blink. What? Olma hands you a reed dipped in goat milk. Touch where it wept. You kneel, studying the jar's surface. It's dry now, but faint lines remain crusts of evaporated dew from the previous night. You begin tracing them with the reed, the milk leaving faint white trails. When finished, the pattern resembles, well, a spider again. You realize it's not about copying the animal. It's about mapping behavior. The way dew travels is the spider, not the spider itself. You lean back and exhale. And for a moment, you feel the same chill that clings to cave walls in early spring. Later, a group of children joins you, each carrying small jars. Their job, to practice dew catching. They place their pots in different courtyard spots, marked by various spider patterns. Then wait. The goal is to see which design pulls in the most condensation. It's like a game but with stakes. Olma tells you that children who master dew paths are later trusted with root storage, herb bundling, even ice casting. You're not sure what ice casting is, but it sounds like magic and refrigeration had a baby. By midday, the sun wipes most dew away. You gather the jars and examine them. One catches your eye, a tiny vessel with a gold-dusted rim and a flawless dew spiral on top. Olma inspects it and nods. This one listens. The spider etched into the lid is barely visible, just a suggestion in the clay. But the dew followed it perfectly. You ask how they know which spider patterns to use. Olma grins. Trial, error, dreams. That's the thing. None of this is standardized. No charts, no universal diagrams. Every family has its own spider archive sketched onto hides, carved into spoons, whispered from grandmothers. And each one only works if the person drawing believes it. The spider walks for you. They say, only if it knows your steps. You return to your own jar and add a second spider smaller, tighter, drawn with pressed ash and finger oil. Olma watches and nods. That one will guard against sweat. It takes a second to realize she doesn't mean human sweat, she means panic moisture. The kind that builds in a jar when it's exposed to inconsistent warmth. An open window, a bad word spoken too close, a betrayal in the kitchen. Yes, even jars get stressed. To calm them, a short ritual is performed. A single note, blown through a hollow reed, is played next to each vessel. The note is soft, uncertain, like a question. If the jar hums back, or more accurately, if it resonates slightly, it's considered stable. If not, the spider symbol must be redrawn, or the pot rewrapped, or in one dramatic case today, lightly spanked with a stick of cinnamon bark. You laugh at that one. Olma doesn't. That one remembered fire, she says. As dusk creeps in, the courtyard transforms again. The spider patterns fade with the light, but you now know they're not gone. They're stored in the clay, in the grooves, in the memory paths drawn by your milk-dipped reed. You realize these aren't drawings. They're instructions, guides, promises. If the morning returns wet, the jars will tell you how they slept. If the morning comes dry, the spiders will show you who forgot to listen. As night falls, you sit quietly beside one of your jars. It's plain, unmarked at least to anyone else. But you know its dew paths now. You know its fears, its strengths, where it wept, where it cooled. And tomorrow, when the dew comes again, you'll be ready. You'll see which spiders stayed and which ones vanished into steam. The sky is a bruised purple this morning, heavy with the weight of coming snow. You can feel it in your bones, in your teeth, even in the way the pots seem to huddle tighter together beneath their wrappings. There's a different kind of energy today, not reverent, not watchful, but alert, because today is duel day. No, not swords or honor or 10 paces in the fog. This is about salt lines and clay and the old stories of rival families who once tried to steal each other's cold. Olma starts early, dragging a shallow bowl of powdered mountain salt across the courtyard like a painter preparing her palette. You know what the cold respects? She asks. Boundaries. You nod automatically, not even pretending to understand. But that's okay, understanding is no longer required. You just do what the morning asks. Children run in carrying sticks, drawing long arcs in the dirt, then tracing over them with fingers dipped in melted wax. They're fast, methodical. Each salt line circles a jar, then breaks. Always a gap, always open-ended. You've learned that by now. The cold doesn't like being boxed in, but today, those gaps are smaller, tighter. You ask why? Olma squints at the mountains. Because this is the season of theft. You learn the old story by the fire, told in half-mumbled phrases by a woman with 3 teeth and a laugh like crushed gravel. Once, long ago, a rival village just over the ridge sent spies to steal cold clay during a frost famine. They crept in at night, bypassed the salt lines, and took 6 jars. Only 5 made it back. The 6th shattered on the path. The cold it released. It crept into their homes, their hearts, their mouths. They couldn't speak for a season. No one tried to steal again. You wonder if that's just folklore, but then again, you've met pots here that feel like they bite. As part of the dual ritual, children are given salt and told to protect their house. Each child chooses 1 jar and guards it for the day, redrawing the salt lines every few hours. Some kids chant, others sing. A few whistle in short, sharp bursts to scare the warm ones. They say, your job is a bit more technical. Olma hands you a stick of charcoal and a small pot filled with sheep's milk. She shows you how to mark dew paths around the salt line, extending like little antennae. To confuse the rival spirit, she explains, so it follows the trail but never finds the door. It's an ancient form of spiritual decoy. 1 part maze, 1 part trick. You crouch and draw carefully, the milk smearing in faint white streaks, the charcoal catching on stones. When you're done, the ground looks like a forgotten language. Midday brings a surprise. A visiting elder from another village. She's short, stocky, and carries a rapid jar under her arm like a football. No one speaks as she enters. She places the jar near the edge of the slab, unwraps it slowly, and exposes a dark, narrow-necked vessel with gold-threaded cloth over the mouth. You whisper to Olma, "Is this the duel?" Olma doesn't answer. She just watches. The visitor lights a clump of dried thyme and swings it slowly around the jar. The smoke billows outward, hits the air above your jars, and curls. It doesn't rise. It folds. That's the test. If the smoke clings, the local jars are considered strong. If it lifts, someone's cold has been weakened. The smoke lingers. Everyone exhales. The duel ends. The elder nods once, rewraps her jar, and leaves without a word. You ask what would have happened if the smoke had lifted. Olma shrugs. Then we would have buried our weakest jar tonight. You're not sure if she's joking. That evening, the children return for the final salt draw. They pour slow, careful lines around their jars, each arc ending in a tiny notch shaped like a footprint to let the cold know it can come home. They say, some draw flowers in the dust, others trace old family symbols. One boy etches a tiny mountain goat, another draws a fish with 5 eyes. She sees everything. He grins. You realize then this isn't about fear. It's about ownership, stewardship, pride. These salt lines are declarations. This is mine, and I know how to protect it. 1 jar begins to hum faintly as night falls. Just a soft vibration, like someone sighing under a heavy blanket. Olma listens. Then she turns to you. She's nervous. You kneel and smooth the salt with your palm. Then redraw it wider. The hum stops. Balance restored. Not all jars make it through duel season. Some weaken. Some warm. Some crack without sound. When that happens, they're not discarded. They're transformed, repurposed as wind guides, herb crushers, or burial keepers. A failed jar, Olma says, is just a pot with a new story. That night, as the wind picks up, you lie near your jar and watch the salt shimmer. The courtyard feels like a battlefield and a garden at once. Everything drawn, protected, guarded, but not out of paranoia, out of love. Because in a world this cold, holding stillness is rebellion. And drawing salt lines, that's how you mark what matters. It starts with a whistle, not from a bird, not from wind, from a jar. You're halfway through scrubbing ash from the slab when it happens, a long, breathy whistle rising from the mouth of an old pot resting in the shaded corner of the courtyard. No one's touched it. No one's nearby, but it sings. And everyone freezes. Olma closes her eyes. She's cracked, she says, but she's trying to hide it. You'd think a cracked jar would be silent, useless. But not here. In this village, cracked pots are watched, listened to, because sometimes the cold inside tries to escape too quickly, and the jar whistles a warning before it collapses. The sound isn't sharp, it's soft, tired, like a breath held too long. Today is packing day, not for travel, not for trade, but for sealing the jars now deemed ready. The ones that survived full moon rituals, cooling cloths, salt duels, and spider tests. You thought sealing would be simple lids, done. But of course not. Here, sealing is a ceremony. The first step is humming. You stand with the others, each assigned a jar. Olma explains the rule. You must hum to the pot while sealing it. Not a melody, not a chant, just a tone. A vibration. The idea is to test the rim, because a humming lid will buzz if the clay is uneven. A bad buzz means the jar will leak breath or memory in winter. You press your lips together, hum low, and hover the lid above your jar. Nothing. You rotate it. Hum again. Buzz. There it is. You adjust. Try again. No buzz. You lower the lid. That's how they test. Not with eyes, not with tape, but with sound. Historians still debate the purpose of this ritual. Some think it's a crude form of pressure testing. Others say it's purely spiritual. One 1970s anthropologist swore the villagers had discovered acoustic clay resonance, whatever that means. Olma just says, you can't seal what you don't speak to. Next comes the whisper. Each person leans into their jar and whispers one sentence, always in Quechua, always about the past. It can be a memory, a name, a warning. You're told the jar listens better if you say something that still stings. You freeze. What do you whisper? Olma gently nudges you. Say something you never said when it mattered. You lean in. You whisper, I should have stayed. The jar doesn't react, but your throat does. The final sealing step is the oil. Each rim is brushed with llama tallow infused with eucalyptus, mint, and crushed charcoal. The scent is sharp medicinal, but ancient. Like a cold cellar full of wet stone and dried flowers, you dip a rag and wipe the rim. Moving counterclockwise 3 times. Clockwise traps the breath. Someone mutters. Counterclockwise teaches it patience. Once sealed, the jars are bound with a simple string, not rope, not wool, but dried corn husk twisted into thread. This isn't for security. It's for memory. Corn remembers sun, they say, and a jar sealed with corn sleeps warmer than one wrapped in silk. You seal yours. The knot holds. Olma nods. That one won't dream too loud. Some jars, though, resist. One begins to hum as the lid lowers, then whistles sharply. A bad sign. The hum says, I'm not ready. The whistle says, try again. They unseal it, rewrap it. Place it back on the slab. No shame in waiting. Olma says, some jars take longer to forget the fire. Another pot whistles so violently it cracks a piece of its lid. Not wide, but deep. The crack cuts across a spiral etched into the surface. Olma studies it, and draws a single red line across the jar's body. Memory fault. She says, we'll give her to the cold springs. You ask what that means. She'll cool other things now. Roots, salt fish, but not stories. Because that's the thing here. Jars are chosen based on what they'll hold. Grains need stability. Water needs silence. Stories need humility. And humility can't survive in a pot that whistles too often. Midday passes. Sealing continues. By late afternoon, the courtyard is filled with soft thuds. The sound of lids settling, cloth being tied, strings being wrapped. The jars sit still, each sealed and marked, dozens of them, some plain, some ornate, all humming with a kind of quiet strength. And then, the final test. Olma brings out a small reed flute. She plays a single, high note over each jar. Not music, just a sound. If the jar is balanced, the note stays pure. If not, it flutters, warps, breaks. Your jar holds steady. You almost smile. But then Olma plays over a jar near the edge. The sound breaks sharp and fast. She doesn't flinch. She simply places a feather on its lid and walks away. You ask what the feather means. It'll be gone by morning, she says. You don't ask if she means the feather or the jar. As evening falls, the sealed pots are placed in a new formation. Not by purpose, not by size, but by sound, softest in the center. Olma instructs, sharpest at the edge. You help arrange them. You notice how your hands no longer hesitate. You place a jar, adjust its lid by touch, step back. You don't even think about it now. The courtyard is silent, but not empty. It holds sound like lungs hold breath. And for the first time, you understand why they hum, why they whisper, why they test with wind and oil and broken salt rings. Because in the Andes, where the mountains echo your thoughts and the cold remembers your name, the only way to seal something is to speak to it first. The air is colder today, but not in the usual way. Not the kind of cold that bites your skin or stiffens your fingers, but the kind that settles, the kind that drapes itself over your shoulders like a heavy memory. Today is the day of fever stones. You don't ask what that means right away. You just follow Olma to the far edge of the courtyard, where a stack of smooth black stones sits arranged in a circle. They're warm almost unnaturally so, even though the sun hasn't touched them yet. They radiate a steady, slow heat, like the leftover breath of something ancient. Olma picks one up and presses it to her cheek. Still remembers me, she says. These stones are volcanic, collected from a specific slope 3 valleys away. They're wrapped in old cloths and kept in cool pits until needed. Today, they're being brought back not to warm people, but to sleep beside the sealed clay jars. That's the part that throws you. Wait, you say, we spent days keeping the jars cold. Now we're warming them. Olma nods, because now they have to hold the cold, and you can't hold what you've never touched from the outside. It sounds like a riddle, but so does everything here. You watch as she nestles a fever stone beside a sealed pot, close but not touching. The stone hums faintly. The pot stays still. The two are left like that stone and jar, warmth and cold, side by side like a story and its echo. This pairing isn't random. Each jar is matched with a fever stone based on what it's meant to store. Water jars get the smallest stones. Quick heat, fast memory. Grain jars need broader stones, slow heat, long forgetfulness. The story jars, they're given the oldest stones, the ones that crack slightly when they cool too fast, because memory needs something that's already broken, Olma says. Otherwise, it hoards. You carry a stone to your jar. It's heavier than it looks. Not warm exactly, but dense. When you place it on the slab beside your pot, you feel the air shift. The pot doesn't move, doesn't hum, but you do. Olma explains that this tradition came from the mountain shepherds people who kept fever stones under their blankets at night to trick their bodies into sweating out illness. When they began storing clay for winter, they used the same principle. Teach the jar to hold the memory of heat, she says, so the cold inside it doesn't vanish too easily. Scholars believe this may have been an early form of thermal regulation, creating a stable climate within porous clay by balancing the exterior temperature. Others think it's purely symbolic, but none of them have lain beside a jar while a fever stone cools. You have, and it feels different. Personal. At noon, a special meal is prepared to antajaza, or stone bread. It's not for you, it's for the stones. Flat loaves of maize flour, herbs, and salt are baked, cooled, and then crumbled beside the stones. You ask why? Because even heat gets hungry. Olma smiles. That's not metaphor. Not here. The crumbs draw ants. The ants draw spiders. And in this odd little food chain, the villagers read signs. If the ants form a circle, good omen. If they march straight toward the jars, the pairings are wrong. Today, most ants stay circling. One jar, though, attracts a line of ants marching straight to its base. Olma frowns, replaces its fever stone with a smaller one. The ants scatter. Balance restored. That afternoon, you help with the echo test. A stone is gently knocked 3 times, and a jar beside it is tapped once. If the sound returns a faint echo, a second hum, the pairing is considered complete. If not, another stone must be chosen. Some pairings take hours. One pot cracks ever so slightly during the test. Not enough to break, just a line. Olma runs her finger over it, sighs, and adds a spiral of ash. She tried to hold too much, she murmurs. You ask if the crack is bad. She shakes her head. It's a new story now. By dusk, the courtyard glows with a kind of heat that isn't heat, not firelight, not sun, but held warmth stored in stones, cradled by clay, echoed in the silence. You walk between the jars, each paired like dance partners with their stones. Some hum, some stay silent. All of them look settled. That night, you sleep in the corner of the courtyard, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, a fever stone nestled at your feet. It radiates into your bones like the memory of someone who once sat close. And just before sleep takes you, you realize this entire ritual clay, cold, cloth, salt, spider, song, it's not just about preservation. It's about teaching things how to stay, how to carry what's too quiet to name, how to hold the shape of a season. Even when the world around you changes, the pots do not stir. The stones, finally, rest. And you dream of jars that whisper back. Morning arrives in a hush, as if even the wind has been told to behave. The jars have slept beside their fever stones for a full cycle now. Most remain silent. A few have developed a thin sheen of condensation, tiny beads gathered like sweat at the rims. What Ulma calls ghost tears. It means the sealing worked. The cold inside is learning restraint. But today, everything changes. Today is Crack Day. Not a celebration, not a punishment, more like a reckoning. Because every jar, no matter how well made or carefully cooled, eventually cracks. Sometimes a hairline split near the base. Sometimes a jagged lightning bolt across the lid. And when it happens, you don't throw the jar away. You apologize to it. The villagers gather early. No loud talk, no music. Just slow footsteps and long glances. Each person carries a jar, some with visible cracks, others whole but suspect. There's an unspoken understanding that the damage may not be visible yet, but the pot knows, and so do they. Ulma hands you a thin reed dipped in soot and rosewater. Trace the crack, she says. If it has no end, it's not finished yet. You kneel beside a jar with a faint fracture across the lid. You draw the reed along the line. It ends under the rim. Ulma watches. That's a secret crack, she says. Whisper before you touch it. You hesitate. Then lean in. You whisper something small, something true. The jar stays silent. Good. But not all are so quiet. Across the courtyard, a jar hums not the soft, low vibration of settling clay. This is sharper. Nervous. Ulma rushes over. The jar is trembling. Its cloth damp. She's remembering too loudly. Someone says. Ulma places both hands on it, palms flat. She closes her eyes, begins to whisper not in Quechua, not in Spanish. Something older, breathy, and uneven. The jar stops shaking. You ask what she said. I reminded her, she says, that forgetting is also a form of care. Cracked jars are not fixed here. They're acknowledged. Each one is placed on a separate slab known as the Wall of Apology. It's not made of stone, it's clay soft. Wet, red earth molded into a curved bench. The jars are nestled into it like teeth in a jaw. You help carry one. It's crack deep and dark. Ulma instructs you to place a dried flower inside before seeding it. Why a flower? Because grief needs something to grow around, she replies. Some jars on the wall are decades old. One has a name carved beneath it. Another has no markings at all, but hums whenever someone sings nearby. She holds an old lullaby. Ulma says, no one remembers which one, but she does. Historians have little to say about this part of the ritual. Most chalk it up to symbolic burial, but the villagers treat it more like confession. They don't mourn cracked jars. They speak to them, thank them. One woman kneels beside her pot and whispers, I'm sorry I tried to fill you too quickly. The crack across the lid widens slightly, and she smiles. That's the strange part. It's not seen as failure. A crack means the jar was brave enough to carry something real, and real things always leave marks. The second half of the day is spent making apology ash, a blend of burnt herbs, corn husk, and dried moss. It's ground into powder, mixed with snow melt, and smeared along the cracks, not to seal them, but to mark them. A way of saying, we see you. You carried well. Rest now. You're asked to perform this on your own jar. It's not cracked. But Ulma insists, mark it anyway. So when the crack comes, it knows it's already forgiven. You do. The ash is warm, surprisingly soft. The mark it leaves is faint but permanent. Before nightfall, a final ritual. Each cracked jar on the apology wall is given one whisper. A visitor must kneel, touch the jar, and tell it something they've never told a person. The idea is to unburden a secret into a vessel already broken. You're nervous. Ulma gestures to an old jar, small, unwrapped. Its crack wide and unapologetic. You kneel. You lean in. You whisper, "I never meant to leave." The pot hums, just once, and then it's quiet. Ulma lays a hand on your shoulder. That's her job now. She'll hold it until you're ready to come back. You rise, heart pounding in a way that has nothing to do with altitude. The jars are left overnight. Some will crumble by morning. Some will remain for generations. Either way, no one tries to make them whole, because here, cracks are not flaws. They're invitations. A jar that breaks while holding cold is not a failure. It is proof that it held something worth remembering. No one talks about that jar. You don't even notice it at first. It's tucked behind the herb drying wall. Beneath a collapsed awning tangled with old vine, dust hides most of its surface. The lid looks fused shut, but one thing is unmistakable. This jar glows. Not brightly, not magically, just persistently, like a stone that spent too long near lightning and hasn't forgotten. Ulma calls it the firefly, and she tells you not to touch it, not because it's dangerous, but because it's tired. They say this jar was made during a season when the cold refused to come, when the snow line retreated so far up the mountains that rivers boiled under moonlight, and roots cooked in their own shadows. That winter, 3 jars cracked just from silence. 2 more burst the moment a spoon was laid inside. Only one held. The firefly jar. It never cooled. Not properly. Not the way the others did. Even wrapped in snow, it stayed warm. Even buried in salt, it breathed. So the villagers did the only thing they could. They fed it light. They placed fireflies inside, not as fuel, not as ritual, as apology. The jar responded. Its surface dimmed. Its breath slowed. And then, just before dawn one day, it began to glow. Faint, constant, not with heat, but with memory. You kneel beside it now, careful not to cast a shadow. The jar doesn't hum, doesn't shake, but the air around it feels intentional, like standing in the same room as someone who's forgiven you but hasn't forgotten. Ulma doesn't speak when she stands beside you. She just lays a dried marigold at the base. You ask, finally, why not break it? She sighs. Some jars never cool, but they still hold something sacred. Historians, of course, would call this superstition. They'd label the glow as bioluminescent residue or heat retained from chemical reaction, though no one's allowed to test it. One anthropologist who tried was asked to leave before nightfall. He measured the pot, Ulma recalls, but forgot to listen to it. They eventually placed the jar in a sealed alcove lined with ash, shaded by corn husks, and covered in a lattice of old chicken bones. Yes, chicken bones. They absorb confusion. Someone tells you, you don't ask for an explanation. To this day, the jar has never cooled. And yet, it hasn't warmed either. It just remains. Every year, during the coldest week, the villagers perform the husk walk, a barefoot procession across dried corn husks, to the firefly's corner. Each person places one item at its base. Never food, never cloth, only light memories, feathers, dried flowers, stones shaped like moons. The idea is to distract the jar, to remind it of softness. You're invited this year. You place a flattened clover you found beneath the apology wall. The jar doesn't glow brighter, but for a moment, the air changes, a soft pressure, like being remembered. Ulma tells you the old ones believe the firefly jar contains a forgotten word, not a secret, not a curse, just a sound, 1 syllable long, that was spoken during the shaping of the world and accidentally trapped in clay. And now, she says, the jar is trying to forget it. You sit with that, trying to forget something you didn't mean to hear, trying to cool what was never supposed to burn. That evening, you help clean the surrounding alcove. No tools, just fingers and breath. Dust is sacred here. You learn that ashes are never swept, only rearranged. Spider webs are relocated, not broken. Every tiny detail is part of the jar's rest. And then, just before sleep, you do something you didn't plan. You speak to it. You whisper, not a confession, not a wish, just a question. What are you still holding? The jar doesn't answer, but your skin prickles, and somewhere, beneath your ribs, something loosens. Later, Ulma tells you the jar is often visited by people who have nowhere else to store their warmth. When a heart stays too hot for too long, she says, it leaks. The firefly jar doesn't collect those leaks. It witnesses them, it holds the outline, the negative, the echo, and over time, It glows. Never enough to see by, just enough to believe. As you fall asleep that night, curled near the edge of the courtyard, you realize some jars are built for silence, some for memory. But this one was built to hold the heat that memory leaves behind. And even though no one touches it, everyone carries it. They come at dusk, just after the air drops from crisp to cruel, one by one. The villagers return to the courtyard, not with the hum of daily ritual, but with silence pressed tight to their shoulders. The fire has been smothered early. The jars are unwrapped. The spider paths cleared away. No salt lines remain. Because tonight, they unseal. It's called the undoing, and it's quieter than you expected. No ceremonial speeches, no music, just hands, dozens of them. Wrinkled, cracked, young, old, all moving with the same careful rhythm. Untie the husk cord, rotate the lid 3 times, lift slowly, like opening a mouth that hasn't spoken all winter. The first jar releases a puff of cold so dense it seems solid. The woman handling it inhales deeply, closes her eyes, and whispers, still sweet. Then she smiles. That's the goal. The undoing is not about usage. It's about witnessing what was held, what made it through. Every jar is treated like an elder returning from a journey. Yours sits near the center, sealed tight, its ash spiral still intact. You kneel beside it, fingers trembling. You don't hum this time. You don't whisper. You just listen. Then you lift the lid. Cold, earthy air hits your face dry, clean, ancient. You smile. It held. Ulma watches from the shadows. She didn't forget. She murmurs, not once. One by one, the villagers begin opening their jars. Not all are perfect. One contains grain turned bitter. Another has cracked along its base, its contents still cool, but forever muted. That one is scooped into a smaller vessel and rewrapped in silence. She gave what she could. Someone says, you wonder how many people will say that about you someday? The undoing isn't about success. It's about acknowledgement. Some jars kept the cold. Others changed shape, changed texture, even changed purpose. One vessel narrow, white, etched with cloud marks, refuses to open. Its cord won't budge. The wool wrap has hardened like bark. Ulma crouches beside it, presses her ear to its side. She's not ready, she says softly. And so they leave it. Not as punishment, as respect. Some memories need more winters. By now, the courtyard is filled with opened jars. Their scents rise mint, clay, cedar, a touch of corn. One smells faintly like snow on laundry. Another like honey left out in a stone basin. The villagers begin sorting. Grain jars are rolled into the long kitchen. Medicine jars are carried to the rear of the compound. Story jars, they're placed near the east wall and lit with a single candle. Not to read by, but to warm the air just enough to stir their breath. You help move one. It feels heavier now. Not because of weight, but because of meaning. And then comes the remaking. Not all jars survive the undoing intact. Some are too cracked, too warm, too loud. But they are not discarded. They are broken on purpose. Each shard collected, each edge sanded, each piece pressed into the courtyard's stone ring. Over time, these fragments build the kind of mosaic path one only visible when it rains. Ulma kneels beside a new crackling jar and says, you tried, you held, now be part of something bigger. The jar is tapped with a stone. It breaks clean. Someone cheers gently. The children are given the task of arranging the shards, choosing where each one will go in the pattern. Not for beauty, for truth. A jagged edge belongs near silence. One girl whispers, this one curved towards song. And it fits. Somehow, it fits. There's one last step before the undoing ends. Each person returns to their original jar, the one they cooled, watched, sang to. They place one item inside, not food, not ash, a reminder, a feather, a thread, a folded leaf. You slip something small into yours, a stone warmed in your palm all evening. Ulma sees it and smiles. Now she'll remember you. Lids are replaced, not sealed, just set gently. These jars are done. Not in the way we use that word to mean finished, but in the way rivers are done carving. They've shaped something. They've taught something. And tomorrow, they'll be clay again. Because that's the final part of the undoing the release. Tomorrow, all the vessels opened tonight will be carried to the river and crushed. Not with grief, with gratitude. Crushed so the clay can begin again. So it doesn't forget how to change. Some say that's wasteful. But here, it's sacred. Because in this world, nothing is kept forever. Not warmth, not memory, not even cold. Only the lessons we draw from them. Only the shape of what we were willing to hold. They carry the jars before sunrise. Not in baskets, not on carts, but in arms. Cradled like children. Some villagers hum as they walk. Others stay silent, eyes fixed on the path ahead steep. Rocky, slick with mist. You're part of the procession now. You carry your jar too? The one you whispered to, the one that held your breath, the one that remembered what you tried to forget. The river is farther than you expected. It winds out past the edge of the cultivated terraces, past the wind-bent trees that always lean west, past the moss-covered stones where children once tied feathers as offerings. You walk in the hush of footfalls and occasional coughs. The air tastes like stone and eucalyptus. No one tells you what to expect. And maybe that's the point. When the river finally appears low, narrow, barely a whisper, you're struck not by its power, but by its calm. This is not a raging, dramatic place. This is where Clay goes to become honest again. The villagers line up. They don't rush, one by one. They step to the water's edge, lift their jars, and tap them against a smooth river stone. Crack! Not a shatter, just enough. Then they lay the pieces in the current, not tossed, not sunk, just placed. The water takes them gently. No one claps, no one cries. It's just done. You step forward. Your jar feels warmer today. Not hot, not fighting, just full. You touch it one last time. Then you strike. It breaks along the ash spiral, right where your breath touched it weeks ago. The pieces slide into your palm, lighter than you imagined. You place them in the river, and they float for a moment. Then they sink. Then they're gone. You sit by the bank for a while. Not because you're expected to, because it feels like the right thing to do. Alma sits beside you. Her hands are empty now. She says nothing for a long while. Then, quietly, Clay doesn't hold things forever. It just gives you time to let go, and you believe her. Behind you, others begin to leave, not with heaviness, with relief. The river has taken what it needed, and now the world can begin again. But the ritual isn't quite finished. Not until night falls. Not until the villagers gather one last time around the courtyard, fire new flames, new stones, fresh clay stacked nearby. The cycle is ready to start again. Not tonight, but soon. Each person places something in the fire, a thread, a splinter, a feather. You offer a pinch of cooled ash from your broken jar. The flames take it without question. And someone, maybe a child, asks Ulma, "Why do we burn the ash?" She smiles. To feed the cold? You almost laugh, because by now, it makes perfect sense. The fire dims, voices fade, and slowly, one by one, the villagers disappear into doorways, under blankets, into dreams. You linger, because you need to, because tonight, the world is just still enough to remember, still enough to listen, still enough to cool. You stay seated by the dying fire long after the embers have curled inward and the scent of wool and smoke hangs like a memory. The air is still, the earth settled. And all around you, the quiet shapes of cooled jars empty now. Maybe, but not erased, seem to hold a silence that isn't absence, but rest. You stretch your fingers, still dusted with ash. You feel the cool breeze slide along your neck, soft as breath, the kind of cold that doesn't threaten, doesn't ask. It just exists and welcomes. Above you, the stars are less points of light and more smudges in the dark. Slow, ancient, patient. The night holds. Your heart slows. Your body remembers how to soften. Somewhere behind your thoughts, a whisper of a reed flute, faint, imagined, enough to guide you. Just a little deeper, and somewhere inside you, something cool and strong and quiet. The shape of a jar. That listened settles for the last time. No stories left to hold, no dreams left to cool, only stillness, only sleep.